So, as I said, the first part of the presentation is for COVID-19, our health and safety policy that's in place as of today. We have not done any on-site audits until next week. So we are beginning to now go back on site to clients. Oops. Okay. So what's happening with COVID right now? US states, Canadian provinces are beginning to reopen. But there is still a large variation in terms of risk between different locations that you're in, as well as just different restrictions and requirements that are in place. So please, do be aware of where you are. Make sure you're up to date on those. If you have any questions, please reach out. There's so many different ones. It goes down to cities, states, countries that are doing different things, as well as, when you're assessing the risk in terms of being able to go on site and those types of things, please consider your location and the location you're going to. Canadian-US border remains closed, so it was just extended for another 30 days. So June 21st, we are not able to go back and forth over the border to do audits at this point. I'm not sure if it will reopen on June 21st. This has now been extended 2 times, so we need to be careful if you do have audits where you're crossing borders. We're definitely looking at those closely and seeing what we can do and making sure that virtual auditing, remote auditing is an option for those. Mexico-US border also is closed to non-essential travel right now, and there wasn't a date that I could see posted on either of the government websites, but it just said until further notice. So again, things are changing, but as of today, that is still closed. Quarantine requirements are still in place for some locations. So there's definitely provinces within Canada and some areas of the US that if you travel outside of your area and you're coming back in, you're going to be required to have some kind of quarantine period. I think those are lifting now in a lot of places, but there are some that remain. So be aware of that, especially if you're traveling into one. We don't want to get to borders and not be aware of just certain situations in place, and make sure that if you have audits coming up and you live in one of those areas, you're able to quarantine yourself when you get home. Anyone with symptoms of COVID-19 must self-isolate. So if you do have any symptoms, you will be just doing remote and virtual auditing until those symptoms are gone, and we'll go through that in a bit more detail. And then our offices are closed. Currently, all of our staff are working. You can get in touch with anybody from their phone or their voicemail or their email, but they are all still not physically in our offices. And that is, we don't know when we'll return. We're really capable to work outside of the office, so we're not in a rush to get back into the office place. We're going to, do what's the safest and the less risk for right now. So assessing if you'll go on site to do an audit. So we have been doing this since the beginning. You've definitely, if you've been doing audits with us regularly, you've been talking to your CSMs, your client service managers. They're reaching out to all clients within 30 days of any audit happening and confirming, if it's possible to go on site, if the audit couldn't be virtual, and if it's not possible to go on site and it's not possible to go to do a virtual audit at the time, then how can we get this audit done this year? So as I said, the IAF ID3, which is allowing special circumstances for the remote auditing. So for AS audits, we're able to do the full audits on site. Everything we went through kind of in our first meeting, that all is remaining in place for now, likely till the end of the year, but we will update you on that as we get industry information. TRC is not going to be requiring any auditor to go on site. So that being said, is I really want to make sure as auditors, as we have our auditors out in workplaces, that you can assess the risk, you're comfortable going. The client, obviously we can't go on site if the client has restrictions, but also, you know your own health, the risk that you're in. We definitely won't be forcing on-site audits. ID3, as I said, is in place, and we're allowed to use the option for virtual audits. So please, use that where we can, because that is our preference. That's the lowest risk. And if we can do a decent audit that way, we should be using that, that process. Required travel related risks. So, we have lots of local auditors audits where you can go and come back in the same day, which lowers your risk. Obviously, if you have to go on airplanes, the longer you're out of your home, the more you're interacting with other people in other places. So we're looking at all of that when we're trying to make a decision of risk and going on site to clients. All clients are contacted to review their restrictions and requirements. So clients have to have policies in place right now for COVID-19 in terms of how they're handling, minimizing risk in their facilities once they're open. So we are asking our clients for that information before every audit. And it's mandatory for our clients to inform us if there's any known cases within their facilities. So when we get that information, that will be passed to you through your CSMs. And then there's going to be an auditor self-screening that you'll do to just ensure you're okay to go on site, and we'll go through that in more detail. So again, any client restrictions or requirements are going to be passed to you through your client service manager for that client. So it's their position. They'll gather all of the information and make sure that you get that if there's any extra information that you do need. We are going to be, as a result of this training, sending out a document that basically summarizes everything I'm going through right now. And you'll be required to review that form and sign it back to us and have that signed back to us before you can do any on-site audits on behalf of TRC. So that will go out, immediately after this, first thing tomorrow morning or tonight, and you'll get that. I know that there's a handful of auditors that are doing audits on site next week. The person I'd like you to send that form back to is Karen Conahan, so she does our back office, and she'll be able to make sure that you have that on file and that you're signed off to do on-site audits. Okay, that's good. Okay, so now I'm going to go, and then the health and safety policy will remain in effect until further notice. So, probably will be operating under these circumstances where COVID-19 is out in the workplaces for quite some time. Okay, so this is going to be really, I'm going to go through in a lot of detail the document that will be sent to you, what it will say, and give you guys a chance to ask questions and what really go over what our policy is. So prior to any on-site audits, we're going to ask you guys to do a self-screening. At this point, there's not going to be any kind of form that you have to fill out or give us any information back. It's really for you to be able to do a self-screening and look at for signs and symptoms and, alert us if any of those exist. So, here we would like you to take your temperature. If you have a fever, you can't go on site to client. So, if fever is over 100 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit or 37.8 Celsius. So if you do have a fever, the day before, check again the morning of, and if it is, we are going to have to move the audit to a remote or virtual audit or reschedule. And then again, assess other symptoms. So we can't have auditors going on site that have any of the symptoms that are associated with COVID-19 for your safety, as well as our customers. So coughs, runny noses, they're all listed there. I think everyone is very familiar with them at this point. So if you do have any symptoms, please, let us know as soon as possible, and we will assess the risk. So we won't be proceeding again with on-site audits if you do have any of those symptoms in place. And we won't be able to have you do on-site audits or travel for us until you're symptom-free for 3 days, or at least 7 days have passed since the symptoms first appeared. So there may be cases where you haven't had symptoms for 3 days, but it hasn't been a full 7 since they originally appeared. Those are the guidelines put out right now by the US and Canada, and so that's what we are going to be following. Any auditor known to have been in close contact with a lab-confirmed case of COVID-19, you'll have to inform us, and then you're going to have a 14-day period before you're able to go back on site to do audits or travel for TRC, just to ensure that you haven't contracted COVID-19 and the symptoms aren't appearing. Okay, so the personal protective equipment that we are going to be requiring to do audits on site, this is not really all personal protective equipment, but it fits best in this area. So a non-medical grade face covering. So sometimes if you have medical grade ones, please feel free to wear them. But what we're requiring is a non-medical grade face covering. They need to be worn when you're in the client facilities. If you do have trouble accessing them, I know there's lots and lots of places now that you can get these, especially reusable ones online. So they should be, pretty easy to get now. But if you are having problems, please do reach out to me. Disinfectant wipes. So this is something else that you should have with you now when you're doing on-site audits, and then access to soap and water or alcohol-based sanitizers. So I think there isn't anywhere that we audit unless you're doing field visits or things like that, but that should be in place for those as well for the client. So that should be accessible always at the client. And just a note on, well, we're going to go through. So wearing a face mask. So your face covering must cover your nose and mouth. I go through in really a lot of detail here about exactly the proper technique to wear masks. I wanted you to have this for your own information. So it can be cloth, it can be a disposable mask, either are okay. There are going to be instances that people might not be able to wear masks for multiple reasons, health reasons. So if that is the case for you, again, please reach out to me directly, and we'll just assess that risk, make sure the client is aware, and that if you are going on site, that you're taken care of as well as the client. Before putting the mask on, wash your hands or use an alcohol-based hand disinfectant. Make sure it's covering your nose and your chin. So you can see I have a picture here of the proper technique to wear the mask. Again, just like any time, even though you're wearing a mask, please avoid touching it, touching your face. And if you do, make sure you're washing your hands just as if you didn't have a mask on. To remove the mask, really you should just only be touching behind the ears on the elastics. Take it off and discard it immediately. If it's a reusable one, which I use, put it into a bag that you're not touching right away, and then just dump that right into your washing machine as soon as you can. Because face masks can get dirty throughout the day if you take it off and set it down, or dispose of it at lunchtime, or if you're going somewhere for a week to do audits every day, I would say that you need to make sure that you have enough masks with you. One won't be enough. If you're not able to do laundry every night, you need to have several masks with you. So just make sure that you are equipped with that. So hand hygiene, I don't think I have to go over this in a lot of detail, but again, wash your hands as soon as you enter the client. Take out any germs that you might have carrying into the facility with you. We've already sent out pamphlets on correct hand washing. I think everyone has seen these, so make sure you're using the correct techniques, at least 20 seconds, hot water, soap. And then, wash your hands at other critical points. Whenever you're interviewing someone and you're talking to a new individual or going into a new space, just take a minute to wash your hands. Again, entering the facility, handling food before eating. If you are wearing gloves, either for work, or you decide to wear gloves, we're not recommending to wear gloves, but if that's something you do want to do, make sure that you're washing your hands after you take them off. And then if you blow your nose, cough, sneeze, again, just excuse yourself and wash your hands. So other things to minimize risk: avoid touching your face. Where possible, we still want to keep that 6 feet separation from individuals. I do know that there's hard sometimes during audits when you're trying to look at things, and that's why we have masks. So, but do try to maintain that where you can. Coughing and sneezing. So again, use a tissue, throw it directly into the trash. If you can't do that, use your elbow, not your hands. And then ensure that regularly touch surfaces such as tables, things like when you go into a room, if you're doing the opening meeting, just take your disinfectant wipe everything down. I know the clients are going to have their own processes. I know that this is, they're wiping down things too, but if you touch any items that belong to the customer, or a tool, or you pick something up, just wipe it down before, when you're done with it, and make sure that, we're doing our part to minimize the risk. Food. So, you know, we all eat during the day. Audits are long. They can be multi-day audits. It can be a full day. You're usually at least eating lunch with a client or during the audit. So we're asking that you don't bring food into a client's facility. So if you have an individually packed lunch that you want to bring and it's okay with the client, that's okay. That's not what I'm talking about. If you have a coffee, you know, a coffee cup that's disposable and you bring that in and there's a lid on it, you know, that's okay. It's probably safer than, you know, using open coffee at a client's facility. But what I am asking, I know there are auditors out there that tend to bring donuts and cookies or things like that. Please don't do that during at this time. Just don't bring, you know, food in to serve to clients. If a client does provide a meal, it's recommended that it's individually packed. Again, I know this is a little bit of a tricky situation. The client's bringing in lunch for you, but you know, they should have these kind of policies in place as well. And do protect yourself, speak up, and then wash hands before and after eating. And then when you're traveling, just make sure you're following the guidelines wherever you are. So again, these guidelines are really do vary right now depending on how many cases there are in the area that you are in, you know, all of those kind of things, what the risk is. So just make sure you're aware and that you are being safe. So again, health when travel. So we are going to have travel starting up. People are going to be getting on planes, staying in hotels, and we just need to make sure, you know, we're not scared, but that we're safe. So ensure that you do know the risks of what's going on at your destination. So, you know, what's happening with COVID there, what are their requirements, how many cases do they have, what is your risk, and make sure that you're prepared for that. Maintain good hygiene and avoid touching face. So that's all the time. Entering hotel rooms, rental cars, same thing. You know, I know that they all have really great policies in place right now. They want to open, they want people to be using their services. So everything is getting cleaned, but it is best practice for you to also just wipe down areas when you first get in. And then when you are returning, if you do have a quarantine, you know that if you go outside of the country or to a specific country and you're coming home, you do need to follow those quarantines before you can do audits for TRC, but those are becoming less and less, so it makes things a bit easier. Okay, so for my piece, in terms of, I'm going to just stop sharing. Okay, so I kind of wanted to see if there's any questions about this part. Let me turn my camera back on. Okay, so we will be sending out, as I said, a form. It's just a 2-page form, and the 3rd page is a signing page where you just review it, show that you took the training, that you understand what the requirements are, and then you can start doing on-site audits. We want to make sure everyone, if you have questions, if you have concerns, that we answer those today. Again, we want to make sure that we're promoting a safe environment for our auditors. People aren't scared, but are taking the precautions they need to ensure that we're all safe. So any questions about what I went through? Okay, so when I do send out the policy, if people are more comfortable asking questions, if they do have questions, feel free to call me, to email me, and I'm here to answer them for sure. So I'm going to pass it over to Vanessa. She is going to go through just the best practices for remote auditing. I know that a lot of you have done remote audits for us. I've got to witness a lot of remote audits. I think overall they're going very, very well. If you are someone that is uncomfortable doing the virtual remote auditing techniques and have questions for me, please feel free. We can set up a time with you and me to go over the platforms that we have and show you how to use them. And I think the information that Vanessa is going to give you will be quite useful. So again, you know, we are promoting still that where you can be doing virtual audits instead of traveling across country, you know, instead of putting yourself at risk if that is the case. Please do use that, because that's why these things are in place right now to, you know, keep us safe and do that. So please know that, those options are available, and, we're wanting to use them. But obviously we also want to get back into clients and see them. So we need to balance the risks in all cases. Okay, so I'll bring up Vanessa's presentation, and I will let her take over.
Okay, thanks, Emily. I will be reviewing some lessons learned about remote auditing that, as Emily said, we've gotten a lot of information over the past couple of months, both from you, our auditors, from us witnessing audits, and just there's been a lot of information in the industry right now about remote auditing. So we wanted to just take a little bit of time today to share that with you. So the first thing we'd like to go over is things you can do in the audit planning phase to make a smoother remote audit. So the number one thing that we've found is asking the client to host the audit on their preferred technology platform. So WebEx, Zoom, Google Hangouts, whatever they use, asking them to host really does increase the efficiency of the audit. So first of all, they're familiar with the technology. They can control inviting people to the meeting, assigning presenters during the meeting, sharing screens as needed. They can control all of that, and it just seems to work a lot better if they're able to do that. Especially, as you've probably encountered, a lot of clients have multiple people working from their home offices, so it's not like they're all in the same place either, and it does take a little bit of coordination to get everyone together and get everyone logged in to a meeting. So that is just something that we've found can be very helpful. I also did want to reiterate that if a client does not have a technology to host the meeting, TRC does have WebEx and Zoom accounts available that you can send us a request if you'd like to use that for an audit. So we do have paid subscriptions that you can use. Just let us know if you need to use that for an audit, and we'll set that up. We'll send you the login and password that you need, and we can help set up the meeting as well. So that's always an option. If we aren't able to have the client host and you don't have a platform either, please just reach out to us. We do have these things available for you as auditors. The second thing that we found is really helpful is a well-defined audit plan being developed and sent out to the client. So, perhaps breaking it down even to the activity level of processes, always including the type of technology being used for each portion of the audit. You might be using, FaceTime for one portion and then a Zoom meeting for something else. There are a lot of different things going on. So making sure that the plan includes all of that information really helps us and the client be able to, pull all the needed parties together and not waste audit time looking for personnel or things like that, or, being unsure of what platform they're supposed to be logging into. So that will really help. Something else that kind of is related to that is requesting a list of auditee names so that you can assign different auditees to different sections of the audit plan right up front, and they can make sure that those people are invited to the online meeting, that they know exactly what time they need to be available. All of that just really helps the audit run a lot smoother throughout the day. And then when you are putting together your audit plan, we really do encourage you to put into the plan, frequent short breaks. So being seated at a computer screen for a long time, for hours at a time, can really, strain our eyes. We need to get up and stretch our legs, be able to do that. We just need a break to be able to refocus our attention when we come back from the break. So that is really important to include that within your audit plan. It's a little bit harder to be spontaneous when you're not there in person, and usually you can kind of feel when a break is needed. But here, being remote, we don't have that that option. So just building that right into the plan can really help. And also just a quick reminder that when you are on a break, if you're not, closing out the whole meeting platform, which probably you won't, just for a 10-minute break, just ensure that you mute your sound, you switch off your camera while you're on the break, and encourage the client to do that as well, just to ensure privacy. You might be needing to take a call and discuss another client during that time, or, just have a personal item to attend to, and we just the client shouldn't be hearing that or seeing that during the audit. So that's just a quick reminder there. And then we can move on to the next slide. This will also be to do with audit planning. So pre-delivery of documentation is something that is allowed, and it is we're finding to be really helpful in helping you as the auditor review the information ahead of time, develop your questioning, and it will limit the amount of time that participants are online kind of looking for information, searching for documents to share with you, all of that kind of thing. So document review does count towards total audit time. So if you do receive information ahead of time from the client and you review it, we can account for that in the audit plan, and it can count towards the total audit duration. For aerospace audits, this would be no more than 10% of that on-site calculated time can be used for these types of activities. And again, they need to be properly accounted for on the audit plan. For ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, up to 20% of the assigned on-site time could be used for these types of document review activities. And then for both, for all standards, this time would be outside of any specific off-site reporting time assigned to that audit. So I know for aerospace, 100% of our audits have assigned off-site reporting time to them. And for our other standards, we have started a policy of implementing a minimum of 2 hours of reporting time for all non-AS audits, but it is taking some time to apply this to all clients. We're doing it as audits come up and as contracts are reissued. So sometimes you might still have an audit that doesn't have the reporting time added, but most of the time you do. So reporting, offsite or reporting, how we refer to it, that would be always to be used for reporting. And then for the remote auditing, if you'd like to use some of the on-site time for document review, that is okay. Just make sure you're showing that in the audit plan and that it's no more than 20% if this is an ISO 9001 or 14001 audit, and no more than 10% if it's in aerospace. If you do have any questions about this, you can just reach out to me directly. We can go over and make sure that, that what you're planning is within the allowable timing. Related to having the client pre-deliver some documentation to you before the audit, it's important that you be specific about the types of information that you're going to need to see during the audit ahead of time. So purchase orders, as specific as sales orders where a change was processed, if you need to look at that. Purchase orders for services, if you want to look at that specifically, records for new suppliers, a copy of the plant layout. There's lots of information that you can let them know ahead of time that you'll need to be seeing. Just be sure to communicate that. And then also going hand in hand with that is also, though, that you need to still be picking your own sample of information. So we can't rely on, only the samples that the client is sending over to you. If they are sending things ahead of time, you still need to be in control of picking your sample, and some of the sample should be, random. But this will help because the client will know, the general types of information they need to be able to access during the audit. And then we can go to the next slide, which just has a little bit of information on troubleshooting during the audit planning phase. So the first issue that can come up is companies that are paper-based. Really, these types of companies are not well suited to a remote assessment. And so far, I think we've been doing a fairly good job at TRC of not assigning these types of companies to have their audit done remotely. What we've been doing when we encounter this is trying to rebook the audit to later in the year. But of course, as the year, keeps progressing, we're having less and less opportunity to move things out. So there might be some instances where, it's not the ideal situation for a remote audit, but we do need to proceed remotely for safety reasons. So these types of audits will take a lot more planning up front. The client will need to scan a lot of information and make sure that it's ready for you. All of that needs to be done before the audit time. They can't be taking up the whole audit time by scanning and, sending information. So that will require, some planning up front, but you will have a lot of notice from your client service manager if that is the case. Another thing that can make the audit go much easier is scheduling a trial run. We really encourage that. That way, everyone will make sure that they have a login, that they have the software downloaded on their computer if it's necessary. If they are having to download something, sometimes the IT department would need to approve that for a client. So all of those types of things we need to have in place before the actual audit. So a trial run can really help with that. Another kind of troubleshooting area is it's kind of unavoidable no matter how much planning we do, that there will be some downtime during the audit, while the client needs to retrieve information. There might be time lost due to technology issues, a network goes down. We just have, a glitch with the software, all of these things can happen. We can plan for this. You can plan to have some activities that you can complete if a situation like this does arise during the audit. But really, if it turns out that these types of issues are eating up a lot of time during the audit, we can't really count that as, on-site audit time. So we need to make some provisions and make sure that we get the audit time completed that needs to be completed. So if you do have a situation like this, where maybe a network goes down and the client doesn't know when it's going to be back up, please just contact us at the office directly and we'll kind of determine on a case-by-case basis the best way to move forward. It might just be best to terminate the day and then rebook another day to complete the remaining hours. It might be that the client is just really struggling with the remote audit and maybe we need to look at seeing if we can rebook an on-site visit later in the year. So there's a number of options that we can look into, but please contact us if this is happening. And we can, work it out with you and make sure that all the required audit time is being completed. And then just the last reminder is time zone considerations. So we do give you this information on our remote auditing form. We're always pointing out if you're in a different time zone than the client, because we do need to make sure that we take that into account. And we, typically the audit should be conducted in the client's time zone. We should be accommodating the client. I think that's it for kind of audit planning information. So just moving on to the next slide, we can get into some topics about conducting the audit. So the first thing that we recommend is the use of a headset. A headset with mute, with noise canceling headphones. This can really make the audit, go a lot smoother. I know we all have, the built-in microphone on the laptop, but if we're using that, it can really create a lot of background noise, especially if you're typing. When you're talking, it can just be hard to hear. So we do really recommend the headset. If you have a wireless headset, you'll be able to even walk around, your home office, grab things without interrupting the audit process. So we do recommend that. Another tip we've received from a number of auditors is setting up 2 screens or devices while you're conducting the audit so that you can have the meeting playing on your computer and any documents reviewed on that screen. And then if you have a tablet or maybe another computer as well, you can type right into the audit report and type out your objective evidence as the audit's happening. So a lot of people are finding that is really the most efficient way to do things remotely. And then in terms of document sharing during the audit, as you've seen from kind of our previous meetings and previous discussions we've had, we don't recommend emailing back and forth of documentation. So just due to confidentiality and information security issues. So we are finding kind of the best way to do things is for the client to set something up like Dropbox or another file sharing platform, and they can invite you, give you a password. Sometimes you need a login and password to access the files. However, the specific platform works. They'll put copies of, their entire QMS along with a lot of records and documents that you've requested to see throughout the audit. They can put everything in there, and then you'll have access to it, a little bit before the audit and during the audit. And then they can revoke your access after the audit is complete. And that takes care of any information security issues. Even if you have all of the information, sent to you this way from the client, screen sharing is still really important during the audit. So it's very important to use the screen sharing feature so that you can read through documents together with the client. If they've transferred the documents to you, like I was just talking about, you could share your screen as you're reading through the document so that they understand where you're at, what exactly you're reviewing, what you're referring to when you're asking them questions. So it just really helps keep everyone on the same page and connected during the audit if we're really utilizing that screen sharing feature. I know, most platforms have that. So Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, all of that, you're able to do that. Just one thing to note is that sometimes the person sharing the screen must be the host of the meeting. So just keep that in mind. That might be different in different platforms that you are using. And then just a couple other tips during when you're conducting the audit. It is important when we're doing remote audits that we are making every effort that we can to verify that who we're speaking to at the client is who they say they are. So if you can have the client turn on their camera so that you can see their face when you're talking to them, that's kind of the best way to do that. If you need to turn your camera off, that's okay. I know it does drag down kind of the bandwidth when we have a lot of videos running. So if you need to turn your camera off, that's totally fine during the audit. But, having the client be able to, see you face to face and you see their face during the audit, at least for a portion of the audit, I think is really important. If you do want to take screenshots during the audit, either of an interview you're conducting or screenshots, or if you want to record portions, like we're recording the webinar right now. Obviously, many of these programs have a record option, so if you think it might be useful to record any part of the audit, we do need to get consent from the client before taking screenshots, recording, anything like that. So you can, just ask in your opening meeting if that's okay with them, or, you can just ask each time that you'd like to take the screenshot or record something, but just making sure that we do obtain the client's permission before doing those types of things during the audit. And then lastly, it is really important that we keep a professional appearance and make sure that we're in professional surroundings when we're conducting the audit. So, kind of an appearance as if you were there on site with them, making sure that you're in like a quiet environment, no distractions, no like inappropriate materials on the walls, anything like that. We have had some comments from clients about things they could see the auditor's surroundings. So just, making sure to keep, professional surroundings and appearance while we're doing these remote audits. Okay, going to the next slide, just some more specifics, kind of more about audio during remote audits. So often there is a delay in audio. Just these types of programs, there is a delay. Also, I'm sure there's different levels of equipment being used. So one client might have a really nice microphone and headset, and it's very easy to hear them. Another client might be just using their computer mic, and it might not be working so well. So these are things we need to take into account. Some things we can do to combat these types of issues are make sure you note when you're done speaking. So, give them a clear signal that you've asked your question, you'd like them, it's their turn to respond. If you need to kind of break into a virtual conversation, try to use a very clear interjection word. I know sometimes, when someone else starts talking, it then cuts off the person who was talking before, and then there's a time kind of when no one can hear anything. So all of these kind of annoying things, there are things we can do to try to make them to minimize them as much as possible. Of course, it's important to ask open-ended questions during the audit, but again, if you need to, stop the client once you've gotten all the information you need, or if you need to interject to kind of direct the conversation in a different direction from what the client is taking it, again, you just use clear interjection words, just speak slowly, and we should be able to get the point across. Also, don't be afraid to tell other participants to mute, or if you're the host, to mute other participants. There can be just a lot of background noise, even just in like a home office setting, and muting everyone will help minimize that. So do not be afraid to ask people to mute, or to turn off a camera if that's distracting, anything like that. Auditing, particularly the production processes, so manufacturing, assembly, warehousing, these activities can be a lot more difficult to audit using ICT. Client activity on the floor is very tough to audit. So it's often a very loud environment. So the background noise can make it very hard for them to hear you speaking to them, and also can make it very hard for you to understand them trying to speak to you. So a couple things that you can use to make that a little bit smoother is encourage the client to have headphones available ahead of time. That can really help them be able to hear you much, much better. Or maybe set up a separate call just on your phone and maybe on their landline. So that can kind of cut down on all these microphone issues. Just setting up, a regular call, that might be the way to do it. If the signal is inconsistent in areas on the floor, so you're noticing it really goes in and out when they're in a particular area, have the operator just step into an area with a better signal so they can be interviewed. I know that's not always possible. They can't always leave and go to a different area, but if it is possible, that's an option that you can try. We really do need to be making every effort we can to audit all of the required processes during a remote audit. So, with recertification audit, we do need to, audit manufacturing as best we can. If there are areas that you really can't audit remotely, then, note that in your audit documentation, and we'll add time next year, but we do need to make every effort to assess all requirements and all client processes during a recertification. And then in some cases with surveillance, we do have flexibility to move things to next year when hopefully we'll be able to go on site. But sometimes we do have things that need to be covered, and we do need to be, making every effort to do an effective audit of those areas. And then just moving on to the next slide, just a couple quick notes about video feeds. So just basic FaceTime and other, video calling apps really drain phone batteries quickly. So if you need to be using those things for long periods of time during the day, just make sure you have your charger by your side so that you don't get disconnected unexpectedly. And then if you're having the client use, a video calling app to show you their facility so that you can see, what you would normally see if you were there on site. Ask them to move the camera around to show you, everything that you want to see. Ask them to pan very slowly. When operating a video feed, often there's lags, and especially when the camera is moving quickly. So do ask them to kind of move the camera very slowly. There also might be some materials, in the plant that might kind of confuse the camera. So, don't be afraid to ask the camera operator to step back from some objects to get you a clear picture, to move very slowly at times so that you can get a clear picture, just be free to give them the direction that you need to give them to make sure you can have the best possible view of what is going on at their site. So that's kind of it for conducting the on-site audit. And then we just have a couple more slides to do with audit reporting. So just some reminders, the audit plan must include the method of remote auditing planned. So WebEx, Zoom, Skype, any of those platforms. If you're planning to use more than one platform, list them all on the plan. Again, this is to help the client know what they need to be logging into at what time, and then also for us to verify, how you conducted the audit. And then please update the audit plan with what was actually done if there are any changes. The audit report also must indicate that the audit was performed remotely due to access constraints associated with the coronavirus pandemic, and you need to also detail the specific methods that you used. So just kind of an example statement that we're looking for could be something like this. An effective remote assessment of the organization was performed with a combination of WebEx and FaceTime for interviews and activity assessment, Dropbox file transfer used for accessing the associated documented information. For ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, please just put that kind of statement right into the key issues box on the audit report. For aerospace, we would expect to see this information in the audit report form 5 in the audit scope block, and also the audit summary should include a description of the audit, how it was conducted remotely and why. All of that should be documented in there. So, we're not looking for, outrageous amounts of information, just, straightforward statements of the methods you used, how you used it throughout the audit. I mean, just saying something like connected with, Sarah over WebEx. Sarah shared her screen with me and showed me the following documents, the following records, things like that. Just really give us a clear picture when we're reviewing the audit, of what was happening and how the audit was conducted. And then just moving on to the next slide. As part of your audit evidence, be sure to list the names of the persons interviewed. So again, kind of like the statement that I just gave, stating the name, how they shared the documentation with you, how you were connected with them. That's really important. It's not acceptable just to review records with a quality contact. We need to be conducting a robust audit that meets the requirements, and we need to make sure that the reporting demonstrates how this was achieved. So please, as much information to that effect into the audit report. For aerospace, recording this type of evidence throughout the process matrix and the pairs. And then lastly, I just wanted to quickly touch on if you're finding that there are things that you can't assess through a remote assessment. So either, a specific requirement of the standard, a certain activity within a process, please make sure that there is a statement in the audit documentation that states what was not able to be assessed, if we need to add additional time so that it can be assessed at the next audit. Please add all the specifics there. And, part of the allowances made by ID3, is that we're doing our best with remote audits, but sometimes, it might result in some extra audit time next year or at the next on-site audit, and that's completely acceptable. So we do need that documented so that we can make sure that we're adding that to next year's audit when needed, and that we have a record of that. So that's pretty much everything I had for lessons learned. There is another slide here that has some resources that you can access. So, there's FAQs being published and updated constantly by IAF, for aerospace by IAQG. So you can always log on and access that information. We are incorporating that into our processes as needed. But you can always access that information as well. The Auditing Practices Group has also issued some guidance on remote audits. And then, MD4 is always available too for you to review. That's requirements for remote auditing. If you have any other resources that you've been using that are really helpful for remote auditing, please let me know, and I can share that with the other auditors as well. We're always looking for more information, more ways to make this process as effective as we can. But that is everything that I had for remote auditing, but I would like to open it up to questions and discussion. If you have questions about this remote auditing content or just about, anything that Emily or myself presented today, please feel free. Now is the time. We'd love to have discussion and questions with all of you.
I have a question.
Who's talking, just so we know?
This is Andrew Kerwin from Oakville, longtime listener, first-time caller. Love your guys' stuff. It had to do with the length of an audit, because I had somebody asking me about this. So let's just say it was a company that had 100 employees, so you guys base audit days based on employees and the other math. And let's say they've kind of shortened, like they've let some people go, or they have a less employee count now. And they're asking about, okay, if it's a day and a half audit, can it now be a 1 day audit instead of a day and a half, because we now have, say, 70 employees or something like that. And then part B, my question is, let's just say it was a 1.5 day audit. Could you do half a day offsite? Let's just say your doc review and other things. So you minimize the amount of on-site time that you actually have to be there for safety issues. I'll hang up and listen to your answer. Thanks.
Okay. Vanessa, did you want me to answer, or
Sure, yeah.
Okay, and Vanessa might need to jump in, but basically is that we haven't reduced a lot of audit time. If people are temporarily have employees laid off, we're all hoping that people are getting back into the workplaces. The audits are in most cases staying the same length. It also, does take some extra time with the remote auditing. So if there is a situation with clients, the client service managers, again, are in contact with the client. So if you do have a client that is asking about this, I would tell them to reach out to their client service manager. We'll look at the situation. And of course, if there's a company that has drastically reduced employees that likely won't come back, and they're a smaller company now, we can adjust timing for audits, especially if they're months out and for next year and such. So I would say to reach out to their client service manager to really assess the situation. In terms of the case where you might have like a 3-day audit and you do maybe not want to stay in a hotel, so you feel that like you could just go on site for 1 day, you could drive there and come home, that is okay as well. So we are doing some audits where they're partially on site, partially off site. We have customers where auditors are set up that they're going to go and just audit production for half a day and do everything else virtual or remotely. So to reduce the risk again with having to be in other facilities or away from home and all of that stuff. So that is all okay. And if you know your clients, their companies, the setup they have, better than we do, We are assessing it with the client, and if you have any of those like opinions or options that you feel you want to carry out the audit in that way, just reach out to the client service manager and we'll definitely arrange that. That is okay while ID3 is still in place. Good question. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I would like to say that thank you to everybody. You know, we had to go from doing very few remote audits to 100% auditing in April remotely, and everybody has jumped on board and done the best they can and kept audits going as much as we can. And, you know, we thank you guys. And do know that, you know, your safety, our customer safety is our #1 priority, and we're looking at every single audit in a lot of detail. And, you know, we want you guys to be safe, and that's why these rules are in place. So please do reach out if you have any questions. We don't want you going on site just because you're nervous to do a virtual audit. We will help you with it. We'll walk you through it. So if that needs to take place, please reach out to us. And again, thank you to everybody. Please stay safe. And, you know, we look forward to when we can actually see people in person again. But I have loved these Zoom calls. I love seeing people's faces more often. And now I feel like I never call anybody. I'm just seeing their faces. So you might get sick of me. I don't know.
Emily?
Yeah.
Emily?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I had a quick question. I'm sorry. There's another CB that I work for that they're actually encouraging us to try to get all of our clients through the end of the year to do their audits remote. Is that something that TRC would be okay with if they'll do them remote?
Yeah, of course. So, you know, especially if it's a surveillance audit and there's nothing that you feel as an auditor you can't effectively audit remotely, then I would say yes. Like for every on-site audit, when we're kind of reaching out 30 days before, we're saying to the client, you know, we will come on site if that's what you would like, that's what the auditor would like. But we're also always checking that there is the backup for a virtual audit in case, you know, there's symptoms, in case things change with cases of COVID. Our biggest thing is to get the audits done as effective as we can and as safely as we can. So we are still encouraging virtual audits, but I do know that there are cases, you know, we have lots of small clients, so lots of people that don't have the technology in place and auditors that feel that it's not effective to do the audit virtually. So we are putting these things in place, but Barbara, definitely, you know, until the end of the year, virtual audits are able to do in all cases that we can. And like Vanessa said, if things can't get audited this year, we'll add time to next year. And we are encouraging it.
Okay, thank you.
Especially where travel is involved. We're really encouraging. All right, any other? I'm going to mute someone, but if they were going to ask a question, I apologize. Okay, if there's no other questions, then I think that we will stop the recording and we'll have this available. And again, thank you. And please reach out to us, me and Vanessa directly, or the client service manager of the audit if it's specific to a particular audit. But if it's a bigger question regarding our processes or TRC, we're available for you guys. So thanks again. And I appreciate all the support and everything that people have been doing to keep audits going and learning, and we're all learning. So thank you. All right, I'm going to end the meeting and stop the recording.
Okay, thanks.
Everyone, really nice to see those who I've seen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.